Hello, it's Aaliyah from the Song of the Winds. I hope you're doing really well. If you watched one of my last videos, last weekend I went to a workshop that Lucy Cavendish was hosting. If you don't know who that is, Lucy Cavendish is an author and an oracle deck creator. She's an Australian lady. She's been a practising witch for about 30 years now. And she has just recently released a new deck, which I thought were oracle cards, but it turns out that they're not. They're called Magickal Spellcards. And they are literally what they say they are, so they're spell cards. Before I begin showing you the deck, I just wanted to run you through some of the key takeaway points that I had from that workshop. And I've got some notes here. They did actually have really quite well supplied materials there for you. So they had a pen and a catalogue and a little notebook, which is quite handy. I think the real takeaway point for me was that it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and I was really pleasantly surprised. I thought that it was going to be training in how to use that deck, but it actually turned out to be quite different. So one thing I find really interesting about Lucy Cavendish is that she does challenge the norms, like the accepted rights and wrongs within you know, magic and spirituality. So she was trying to encourage us to really challenge what it is that we know about the elements, about the association with all of the elements, with the lunar phases, just with anything that's sort of taught to us by rote, you know, really kind of get to the bottom of, well, why would that be the case, and do we agree? One question I remember her asking us was, how long does a full moon last? And almost everyone in the class sort of said three days. So 3 days is the time when most people would consider that the energies of the full moon are present. So for any kind of spell working during that time, a couple of days either side of the full moon is generally considered to be okay to still tap into that energy. But she researched that, and I was really surprised to learn that in order for the full moon to be visible, that 100% of that solar light is being reflected. That period of time only lasts for about 3 hours. And because that is such a high tide of power, during that period of time, if you're putting your crystals out, you're not necessarily cleansing them under the light of the full moon, you're actually charging them up with energy. The best way to remember that, I think, is if you imagine if you're trying to throw something into the ocean at high tide, it's going to continue to come back to you. That energy is pushing it, that sort of power is pushing it back towards you. So it's not a time where you would want to really release anything, because it is going to reflect back, so to speak. So along that line, it is best not to try and release anything into the full moon, even though after the full moon you do go into the waning moon, which is when it does make sense to try and release things from your life. But if you try and release into the full moon, it is likely to just reflect back at you and be amplified. So that discussion was held within the first few minutes of the workshop beginning. And I thought that was a really interesting way to start, because it did challenge even a lot of what was you know, published online, and a lot of different sort of lunar almanacs that are available. She pointed out that really the best place to find that information is on the NASA website, which is a resource I hadn't considered before, so that was a nice sort of thing to have. Apparently even a lot of the lunar apps and diaries and all kinds of things, moon phase, even have issues with when the dark of the moon is. Quite a lot of them don't include the dark of the moon, it just sort of clicks on to the new moon. And she gave a few examples of where she had gone and sort of checked and tried to marry that information up against the NASA website, and it could have been, you know, days out sometimes, you know, really significant time differences. So if you're quite serious about working with the moon and working with those naturally present energies within the world, it does make sense to not sort of take everything as gospel if it is published. You know, make sure that you still know how to research and that you're satisfied with the information that you're finding. You don't have to take something verbatim just because it has been published. So on that basis as well, I did have a bit of a revelation when I was in the workshop. So we were talking about being based in the Southern Hemisphere, being in Australia, and if you just imagine if you're on the East Coast, obviously this wouldn't quite work if you were on you know, the other side of Australia, on the west coast, how you would consider where the different elements lie. So in Australia, I shouldn't say obviously, but in Australia we would typically associate east with water, because that is where, for a lot of Australians, that is where our closest, you know, big body of water is. And she went through with the group and talked about what, you know, most people would consider to be the reference points and all that kind of stuff. And I've got a different point of view with fire. What the majority of people were considering was that north, when you're in Australia, would be aligned with the element of fire, because that is where it gets hotter. It's heading up towards the equator. Whereas for me, because I have an Aboriginal background in my my family, and I feel really quite connected to the landmass that is Australia, I see Uluru in the Northern Territory. It's not quite in the centre of Australia, but it's a roundabout, kind of where you could imagine if it was a human body where the heart would sit. It's not right in the middle, it is a little bit further up. So for me, Uluru, also known as Ayers Rock, but Uluru is the correct name, that is where I would consider fire. I consider fire to be more of a hot kind of element, not sort of humid and moist. So for me, north would actually be associated with earth, because that is where the majority of land mass is in my mind, and then, you know, into the west is where fire would be. And out of the entire group, I was the only person that felt that way, and Lucy sort of challenged me a little bit on it and didn't necessarily agree, and that's okay, because for the first time ever I genuinely didn't care, because that was my opinion. That's the way that I see things. And I think at previous points in my life I would have thought, oh, maybe I've got it wrong, maybe I'm seeing it differently. And yeah, it was the first time I realised I genuinely I'm not bothered by what anyone else thinks. It really matters what I think in my practice, and it truly is fine to have a differing opinion to someone else about the way that you view spirituality and your associations. She did have an interesting point where, focusing so much on those affirmations and those manifestations, it's a little bit unbalanced elementally. So her sort of view of that was that you were sort of putting a little bit too much focus on the air element there, which might actually hinder your ability to bring it into the world, to manifest. So her suggestion was to try and involve the other three elements with that sort of work as well, so that you're not just kind of shouting into the wind, you're utilising the other elements so that you can help bring that forth into reality for you. She did touch a little bit on knot magic, which is something I haven't really worked with for many years, and even then it was only a small sort of handicraft spell in Scott Cunningham's and David Harrison, I think, are the authors. Magickal, what is it called? Spellcrafts. That's it, Spellcrafts. And there was a sort of knotting, plaiting, you know, spell in there. So that was the only time I've really utilised knots. But she spoke a little bit about old sea witches and you know, using the knots and sort of tying the power into that. And that was really cool, because I just so happened to have plaited my hair that day, and I didn't really, you know, think too much of it, but it's made me think a little bit more deeply even about how I style my hair now, and how you can literally weave magic into anything in your day-to-day. She did touch on something really quite interesting. With a lot of manifestation work that people are doing that is quite popular at the moment, even for people that really wouldn't consider themselves, you know, witchy or anything like that. A lot of people are starting to, you know, create crystal grids and work with the moon phases, which is lovely. Another thing that she reminded us to do was to carve out some time to contemplate. That's something that is kind of difficult to do. Like, it feels as if there's a lot of pressure that we're constantly on the go. We're go, you know, we're working on this project and we've got lots of plates spinning and we're doing all these kind of things. But there is real value in being able to slow down and research and deeply consider something, and that isn't time that's wasted, which was a lovely reminder. I actually really needed to hear that, because I'm one of those people that has to be busy constantly, and I find ways to make myself busy even when I don't need to. So as an example, a few nights per week my husband sort of you know, takes over the parenting duties solo, and I'll have a few hours to myself. And while I could have a nice bath and catch up on some TV shows and paint my nails or do whatever on earth it is that I feel like I want to do to try and relax, I just completely focus in on my business. I focus in on doing, you know, readings for people, and yeah, there's sort of never a dull moment. There's always time being filled to its fullest. And yeah, maybe that's not such a great idea. Maybe I do need to set aside some more time to contemplate, so that I can actually identify what I really value, what I really want to achieve, what I really feel. So that was an interesting point. She said the most interesting thing about twin flames. A lot of the work that I've been doing recently for other people has been centered around self-love. I wonder if it might have something to do with just the astrology going on at the moment, but it seems as if almost everyone is having self-love issues, even with people that I'm not reading for, like close friends of mine, yeah, like lots of people. And so it was very timely to hear this. She did preface it by saying that it's not quite the popular opinion. So here we go. So with twin flames, it's as if you're sort of seeking to find that balance, that kind of mirror externally outside of yourself, where the real challenge is to try and marry that masculine and that feminine energies within you, and find within you that which you seek in another person. What we consider to be our twin flame is actually, in a lot of ways, or what we seek in a twin flame is what we really should be trying to tap into within ourselves. It's really about us. It's not about an external person. I also love the way she spoke about our physicality, and once again this sort of ties back into the self-love challenges that many people are having at the moment. She reminded us that our body is not just this sort of meat suit. It's not this flesh sack that just carries around our soul and our consciousness. That it's actually sacred. It's not just a vessel. It's the way that our soul chose to incarnate itself in this life. So there's many lessons that can be learned by our physicality, and being able to honour our physicality, whether it's through the things that we do to ourselves, the care that we have, the way that we exercise, what foods we eat. It's all an expression of appreciation for the divineness that is our physicality. She also said, and I think this is especially lovely, it's how spirit chose to express in this lifetime, and it's a gift of our ancestors, which is so true. Our body is a reflection of that who have come before us. If we spend a lot of time honouring our ancestors and thinking about their contribution to our lives and what they have done throughout their lives in order for our lives to be better or changed, or you know, whatever it is that they have done, what better way to honour it than actually to look in the mirror and see all of those elements of ourselves that are tiny little pieces of another person. It's actually really quite remarkable. That makes me feel, it makes me feel giddy and connected, the same way that if I think about, you know, the air I'm breathing right now is the same breath that the dinosaurs breathed. And yeah, just, it was so spinny. I loved it. I'd never thought about it like that before, and it really spoke to me. This was also great. Your matter matters. It will never ever leave the planet. That's just, it gives me tingles. It's so lovely. I really hope that in my lifetime we can have, you know, cardboard box burials, because that's absolutely how I want to go. Well, not go. That'd be terrible. But like how I would like to be. My body would be handled after death. That'd be quite nice. That's really the ultimate goal, isn't it? Like, we know that is what benefits the earth. It just seems so foreign to me how we don't really do that. We're not allowed to do that, as if it's disgusting, but everything decays and it benefits the earth. So yeah, seems like a weird thing to get caught up on. Also, it's a gift to be a crone, and older people deserve to be seen. This is so true, even when I think about a lot of the imagery in tarot decks, for example. It's always youngish, pretty women, and if older women are represented, it's usually only even up until like the mother phase. And I have to wonder if the underrepresentation is a contributing factor for how older people just don't seem to be valued in the same way as younger people, as if, you know, apparent beauty is the only thing of any worth, of any note. Yeah, it's quite depressing. It really is true. Even if I think about it in terms of what happens when people reach a certain age in the workforce. You know, they're just sort of forced to retire typically, or made redundant. Yeah, it's quite a problem. There's a few other little quotes that she had from the day that I've jotted down that I really enjoyed, and I'll just sort of quickly go through them. We cannot change without being changed. That was like a sort of spell reference, and that's absolutely true. Energy has life beyond that which we send out and when we send it out. So true. So yeah, that's about being really mindful about what we're sending out. So what I'll do now is just change the setup of the camera, and I'll take you through the Magickal Spellcards. Okay, so let's dive in and take a look at these cards. I have taken off the protective wrap because we had a bit of a flick through them at the workshop, but that's pretty much all that's been done with them. It hasn't had anything, haven't really used them yet or anything, so you'll be getting a pretty sort of fresh unboxing look. I really enjoy the symbols at the front, and I think it's actually what they use as the back of the deck as well. So craft, cast, activate and empower. And this deck is by Blue Angel, so it's a very sturdy, you know, nice quality box. The guidebook is a decent size, usual sort of Blue Angel quality. So it's black and white inside, references a few of the other decks that Lucy Cavendish has available. I don't actually own this one, but a friend of mine does, and yeah, I was really surprised at how bang on the readings were with it. I think I'll probably actually get that one myself, hopefully at some point, because it was surprisingly deep. But that's it there, and let's see what she goes through. So all the different sort of spells there, and from what I saw in the workshop, the way that it works is each card is just sort of like the chant or the affirmation that you can use for that particular spell, but the guidebook takes you into a lot more detail about what you would need to do to achieve that goal. And you can also use this as an oracle deck if you choose to, so perhaps you weren't really sure what it was that you wanted to draw into your life, or you were feeling a little bit lost. You could use it as an oracle deck and just sort of get a feel for what you should be working on. There's lots of information in here. I think for especially anyone who hadn't really done any magical work before, this would be a lovely starting point, and even a nice refresher for someone who is a bit more advanced. So you can see here that there's a lot of information that you can follow. It's still fairly basic and accessible. One thing she did mention was that I think it was in 2002 that she had her first sort of version of these out, but upon reflection she realized that a lot of the instructions were just a little bit too binding, you know, like it's got to be on you've got to cast this one on a Wednesday on the waxing moon, and you know, when she thought about it, it was like, it's probably only a few times in a year that actually occurs, and you know, what about family commitments, work commitments? Sometimes it can be quite hard to achieve that, so she has revised it and made it a bit more accessible. And because I'm pedantic, I put the little plastic wrap back on again. So let's see how many cards there are. I think I have forgotten. There's 45. Thickness wise, yeah, they're a good thickness. Something I noticed immediately when I began to flip through, oh no, it's a totally different card back. I do like that image though. Yeah, but one thing I did notice when I was flipping through the deck at the workshop was, and this is probably my only bugbear with the deck, is that, correct me if I'm wrong, definitely, I might have this wrong and I haven't read the guidebook, so maybe it is included in there, but the images appear to be like royalty-free, copyright-free kind of stock images, if I may. It doesn't look as if an artist has actually been commissioned for this deck, and while I understand that it's not necessarily an oracle deck and it's not as if you need to tap into the images to really get a feel for the energy of the card, or you know what your intuition is sort of telling you, it's like it was just a missed opportunity. You know, they're pretty enough, but also it kind of lacks consistency. And I suppose you don't really need consistency because they are spell cards and not an oracle card, but I just keep on coming back to that and I can't quite move past it. So I think that's probably only my constructive feedback for this deck, is that it would have been really lovely to see an artist brought on board. But what I'll do is I'll just go through them one by one so we can all have a bit of a look. Another thing I did enjoy about this deck is that there's the usual kind of suspects in terms of cards, like beauty and love and all those kind of things, but there's some more kind of like practical day-to-day spell work, which I really enjoy. There's one for study, there's one for organisation. That's the kind of stuff that I really struggle with, and it's always beneficial for me to see someone else's you know, take on that and be able to actually bring more of that into my life, because I do struggle to stay organised. I've got quite a sort of crazy brain and I find it difficult to stay focused. I'll think of different things when I'm in the middle of a task and I'll have to write that down, or I'll sort of pick up my phone to, you know, check a message that I need to in order for me to complete this particular task. Before I know it, I've been on Instagram for 15 minutes and I've achieved nothing. So, yeah, I could use some organisation and some self-discipline. So do you see what I mean about the images? They're pretty enough, but I really do get the feeling that they're stock. Which sucks a bit, because it's not as if Blue Angel are a particularly small publisher in my mind. I think they would have been able to get an artist on board. This one feels especially thick. I actually thought there might have been two. That's like almost double card thickness. Have I got two? No? Okay. Interesting. Oh, look, the cards alternate. They've got different images on the back. I didn't realise that at first. Oh yeah! Actually, the card backs are quite cool. Wow, I might need to do a flip through of the card backs. I need this so badly. That's my card, guys. That's my card. Cool. Okay. So as far as the card backs go, what have we got? So it seems to alternate back and forth between 5 cards. Yeah, see, they're all really nice symbols. So what else can I say about this deck? Well, not a lot until I actually begin to work with it. Having had a bit of a flip through, probably only maybe a third of them would be relevant for me at this point in my life. I don't think I would necessarily use all of them, but I am interested to use them in like an oracle card sense. You know how sometimes there's a need of something and you just can't actually put your finger on what it is? It might be really interesting exercise to use it as an oracle deck and just see what sort of pops up. You know, for all I know, I might need passion. What else? Inspiration. Yeah. So that's cool. She did mention as well that it's probably a good idea not to have more than one on the go at any month, just to make sure that you're not sort of spreading your energies too thin. But there we have it. So they're the Magickal spell cards. I can't remember off the top of my head what the recommended retail price is, but I'll put it into the description box along with the links to where you can purchase this on the Blue Angel site and also Lucy Cavendish's website. But thank you for joining me while I did this this little sort of unboxing. I had a good time flipping through them, you know, so I could get a feel for them as well. So thank you for sharing that with me. And yeah, I will chat to you guys real soon, and I'll have a bit more of an actual work with these and then report back on my findings. Okay, until I see you next, or until you see me next. I can't see you, wouldn't that be creepy? I'm watching you. You have a lovely day, week, month, whatever it ends up being until my next video, and I will talk to you then. Okay, take care. Bye.